Welcome to Encounter Wargaming, I'm Jay, and today we're going to be continuing our journey into the second edition of Warhammer 40,000 with Codex Imperial Guard. Alright, so last week I promised you guys Codex Imperial Guard, and here it is, the second edition Codex Imperial Guard. So we got some badass catachans right there, some pretty cool cover art if you ask me. Looking super badass, a whole army of Arnies. I love how they got like the orc skulls dead on the ground and stuff, it's so cool. Alright, this is a big one, so we're going to try and get through this in a nice timely manner. We're opening it up. Look at the old models, loving it. I always love looking at these first pages because it gives you some cool look at the way the models used to be back then. So we got the old Mardians, which I actually have a bunch of. I haven't actually done up that army yet, but I'm hoping to bring them back, you know what I mean? And the old Talarn Desert Raiders. And we've also got the old Attilan Rough Riders, which is wicked cool. Look at the old Khorne stuff. The old Bloodletters, how silly they looked. The Fleshhounds actually weren't that bad. I kind of like them, actually. And the old single pose plastic Berserkers, where they were all in the same pose. So funny. And the old Tyranids always blow my mind. Look at the old Tyranid Warriors. I love those models. I would love to get a bunch of those models. Especially because I intend on doing a Gene Stealer cult army in 40k, and they just look so much more Gene Stealer-y to me. Because of the big bulbous heads and stuff. And the old Screamer Killer, of course. I used to love that model when I was a kid. I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and now looking at it compared to the new Carnifexes, it's just like, wow, that looks silly. But it's still super cool nonetheless. And the old Termagants, the little guys. Awesome. So, as usual, we're looking at this page right here. This is our first go-to whenever I'm looking at an old book. I always whip open this page because, first of all, it gives me the date. So we've got the copyright date at 1995. So all the ones we've been looking at lately have been the 94s. We're going into 95 now. Again, I'm trying to keep these in somewhat of a chronological order. If I'm a little bit off, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit off. And I always like to look at the credits because this book is by Rick Priestley. Awesome. He also did the Eldar book that we just looked at. And we've seen a couple other writers jump in through some of the other books we had looked at. But again, Rick Priestley, I idolize this man. He is literally the dude who invented Warhammer, in my opinion. I mean, he designed pretty much all the initial rules. And sadly, he doesn't work for GW anymore. He is now working for... oh shit, what's the name of the company? I don't know. The company that makes Bolt Action. He's now designing Bolt Action, which is wicked cool. Got the table of contents. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff in this book. They don't make codexes like this anymore, where it's just a ridiculous amount of stuff. But going through, we've got basically, of course, the fluff, explaining to you what the Imperial Guard are, all their regiments, how it all works, the weapons of the Imperial Guard, all their vehicles. Color section, of course, is going to be all your heavy metal, cool-ass paint jobs, and we'll get to that eventually. Got all their special rules outlined in one section, which is excellent. Again, they don't do things quite this way anymore, but it is the way we've been doing all of these second ed ones. And then we get into the actual army list. So we've got the command, structures, battle line, vehicles, support, and special characters. Interesting how they've divided that into more sections, and I believe it's because the Imperial Guard are organized slightly differently than most of the other armies. I imagine they'll still abide to that, you know, 50% characters, 25% squads, etc., etc., etc. But we're going to find out, regardless. Some badass artwork there. Catachan with Power Fist. Cool. Whoa! John Blanche. Look at that. Awesome. Those are the old Valhallans. Loving it. So cool. Talarn Desert Raider there. Cool. So again, as I always say, I'm not going to go through all the fluff with you guys. We're just going to take a look at this book. Again, if you guys really want to hear fluff videos, I can always do fluff videos, but we're not doing those at the same time today because I got a big book to get through here. And the point of this series is really just to show you guys the awesome old school books. Of course, some fluff has been retcon and stuff like that, so you never know what's different. but a lot of things haven't changed, I don't think, but a few things have, and so I won't be going through the fluff today. Bottom line there. Cool. I actually used that commissar right there. Actually used to be a model where he carried a flamer and a power axe. I believe I actually used to have that model. I think that's the one I have now turned into my Renegade Commander. So I'm just giving him different arms. But still cool to look back nonetheless. And the old Rattlings. Super cool. Various regiments of the Imperial Guard. So we've got the Catachans, Catachan Jungle Fighters, the Cadian Shock Troops, of course Cadia being the first line of defense against the Eye of Terror, Valhalla, the Ice Warriors, we've got the Mordian Iron Guard, so this is even before the Steel Legion. This was your Iron Guard, meaning that like this was your mechanized guard regiment, I guess, before they came out in third with the Steel Legion of Armageddon. War Against Chaos, cool. We've got Talarn Desert Raiders. It's funny how in each one of these sections they're putting their see, Conspiracy of Chaos, Chaos Attacks. It's like the first thing they mention in each of them is their fight against chaos. So that's interesting. Just something to note about the fluff of the time. Dark Gods of Weight, the Dark Library, Eldar Attack, cool. Attila, the Attilan Rough Riders. Basically sort of like your Mongolians, I guess, of the future. Alright, and now we're into the bestiary. So these are the forces of the Imperial Guard. Sort of your standard things, you know, you've got your standard guardsmen. Of course, they've just lumped them all into one kind of thing. A guardsman is a guardsman is a guardsman, regardless of what regiment he comes from. We've got the Rough Riders, which again, at the time, the only models that existed were the Attilan Rough Riders. I believe later on down the road, they came out with Talarn Rough Riders, and I'm not entirely sure. They might have been a Forge World only kind of thing. But I thought that was wicked cool at the time because, you know, it was interesting that the only Rough Riders you could field back in 2nd edition were all from the Attilan regiments. Which kind of makes sense, I guess, because, again, like I say, they were kind of that Mongolian theme. So, like, the same thing with the White Scars Space Marine chapter, how they're all mounted on bikes. I guess the same idea here. The cavalry, per se, are the, like, Mongolian equivalents. The Genghis Khan kind of look to them.
Hey everybody, I'm Adam.
And I'm Jay.
We are Encounter Wargaming.
And we wanted to celebrate hitting our 1,500 subscribers with giving some stuff away. What are we giving away, Adam?
Fort Bane! Yeah. Alright, we're calling this the 2,500 subscriber Forge Bane giveaway because that's the target we need to hit to give this puppy away.
That's right. So the first thing you need to do is share this video, the video you are watching right now. And
then click subscribe on YouTube.
if you haven't already.
That's it for one entry.
And the more you share it, hopefully, the more people we can get to hit subscribe and hit that 2,500.
Woo!
But there are other ways to win as well.
Tell them about it.
Well, you can follow us on Twitch. That will also get you an entry. So you subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitch. On top of that,
support us on Patreon for 5 big buckaroo entries.
Crazy. So also all the people that already support us on Patreon, don't worry, you're also 5 entries. But also, you can hit subscribe on Twitch. Subscribing on Twitch will get you another 5 entries into the contest.
So good, and all of this to say thank you guys for all the support. We appreciate it very much. We've come a long way, and it's because of you.
It's true. It's been a wild ride, and thanks for all the support, all the help, and we want to give you some cool stuff as a thank you.
Awesome. So hey, remember to share this video. And guys, I think that's it. So we'll see you at our next.
The Rattling Snipers and the Ogrins, your standard abhumans, which are generally accepted in Imperial Guard regiments. You don't see many other abhumans. In Rogue Trader, there was Imperial Guard Beastmen. I think they kind of did away with that in this edition. As we'll get into the Chaos Space Marine book, you'll see that they actually have Beastmen in that book, but not for the loyal regiments, which is interesting. Whereas in Rogue Trader, they actually did have Beastmen regiments, which were super loyal to the Imperium. because beastmen are very loyal, apparently. As long as they have commissars telling them what to do. So here we go. We got the commissars, we got Primaris Psychers. Again, usual deal. Stormtroopers, the wicked old school stormtroopers with the berets. I like how when they redid the Militarum Tempestus, I almost forgot those. So many Latin names. I almost forgot the name of them. That they incorporated the berets into the new models, which is awesome. I actually have a whole bunch of these old pewter and plastic stormtroopers, which I do intend to incorporate into an Imperial Guard army one day. Again, like I say, I have a crap load of Mordians sitting in a box somewhere, which I would love to incorporate, but my queue is freaking huge at this point, and I'm not going to be building Imperial Guard anytime soon, but that is the plan. So now we're going into the weapons. We've got the Imperial Guard Mortar, guess range weapon. So here you go, you got the long and short ranges. It just says guess between 12 and 60. There's no long and short range per se. And they've done away with guess range weapons. I think 4th they got rid of them. We had guess range weapons in 3rd, and of course you had to guess before you fired any other weapons because you couldn't pre-measure back then. In 2nd, I'm not sure. I don't remember if you could or couldn't pre-measure. You probably couldn't because of guess range weapons. In 4th, they done away with all that because people were kind of complaining that they couldn't pre-measure. I'm not even sure you could pre-measure in 4th now that I think back, but I know you could in 5th, so that's something to note. Frag Defenders, what is this? Special kind of auto launcher ammunition to be fired on the standard vehicle. Oh, okay, so that's your frag launchers, which are nowadays your smoke launchers. We looked at that in the Space Marine book, actually, when I went through the Ultramarines book, that the smoke launchers on the vehicles were actually grenade launchers back in this edition, which in my opinion is so much cooler. Like, literally the guys are getting out the side door and like it's firing grenades to cover them as they exit. For the last few editions, they've basically just been puffing smoke so you can sort of obscure your vehicle, which is not nearly as cool as a grenade launcher firing out the side of the vehicle as the dudes disembark. Demolisher Cannon, as it's always been, strength 10. Interesting, it's 2d6 damage. That's pretty freaking gross. 24-inch range, as it's always been, -3 save modifier, totally makes sense. 3d6 plus 10 armor penetration. Yikes. And it says 3-inch blast. That's interesting. You'd think it would have been an ordnance template, which is a 5-inch blast marker. Interesting to note. Nonetheless, we've got heavy mortars. Cool. Yep. So it's showing it there on the back of the, crap, what is it called? A Griffin. Griffin heavy mortar. So now we have heavy mortars as artillery pieces available through Forge World in the current edition, as well as in the last couple editions. I believe in this edition the only heavy mortar was on the back of the Griffin, and I'm not even entirely sure if Griffins are still around in the rules. They might even not be, because they've got so many other cool artillery tanks to deal with. But correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Comment below. Let me know. Are Griffins still around in the new Astra Militarum book? I actually don't have the current 8th edition Astra Militarum book, so let me know if Griffins are still a thing. What is this? Shell types. Oh, cool. They had different shell types you could fire out of the Griffin. That's kind of neat. Frag shell, melt-a-shell, inferno shell. Griffin blast markers. Yeah, 3-inch blast, 2-inch blast, 1-inch blast. Awesome. Frag shell strength 3, inferno shell strength 5, melt-a-shell strength 8. Of course, it's a melta. Yep, save modifiers reflect, respectively. Badass. Inferno cannon. So that's your Hellhounds and stuff, right? Yep. Now, in this edition, the Hellhounds were only a flame tank. I believe it was in 4th they introduced the Devil Dog and those things. Like the Melta version of it, and like that didn't exist back then. A Hellhound was literally just a Hellhound. It had the big ass flamer on its turret. Inferno cannon versus armored vehicles. Wow, it had a -4 save modifier. That's badass. Armor penetration 2d6 plus 6, which sounds like a lot, but when you have things that are like armor 24 and stuff, it's not really a lot. Earthshaker Cannon, badass on the Basilisk. Cool. Strength 8. That's interesting to note. I believe they were Strength 9 in the last edition. I assume they're Strength 9 now as well. Needle Sniper Rifle. Now they don't call them Needle Sniper Rifles anymore. They just call them Sniper Rifles. But in this edition, they refer to them as Needle Rifles, which is kind of cool because they had needle pistols and stuff like that. And I think needle pistols have made their comeback in the form of the Gene Stealer cults. But again, I might be wrong about that. I hope I'm not. Ogren Ripper Gun. Cool. Only a 12-inch range. -2 to hit at 6 inches to 12 inches. It's only a strength 4. Sustained fire, 2 dice. Wow, that means you could have anywhere from 2 to 6 shots and like double the chances of jamming. So not a reliable weapon, but when it works, it fires a lot of shots. Getting into the vehicles, they're just kind of explaining the Leman Russ Demolisher. Chimera, Griffin, Basilisk, Hellhound, Sentinel. Boom. Basically all that was available back then. Like these new ones with the rockets and stuff like that, it all came about in 4th or 5th. The old Commissar Yarrick, look at his claw. Silly, right? I actually really love that model, the old school model of Commissar Yarrick. They redid him in 3rd with the Codex Armageddon to match the new aesthetic of the orcs. This claw, of course, matches the old orc aesthetic. But I think I would still use the old Commissar Yarrick model in games because he is just, like I say, this stuff just brings back my childhood. It makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So now we get to look at the old school models. I will comment that the old school Catachans, though extra beefy and silly looking, they actually look less silly than the current plastics. And the current plastics actually came out in 3rd, where they did the Catachans and the Cadians, and we've stuck with those 2 regiments ever since. They haven't come out with any new plastic regiments. They introduced the Vostroyans, the Firstborn, in I think 4th, and they came out with an entire pewter line, which was just unheard of, because back in these days, everything was pewter. All of the regiments. Which is insane to think about, because literally you'd spend like $10 for a blister of 2 dudes. And so it was, you think Imperial Guard are expensive to build now? They were definitely stupid expensive to build back then. But I still think the old school Catachans look so much less goofy than the current plastics. Just because the current plastics have really weird poses, and the facial expressions are just absolutely ridiculous. These guys all look like they're freaking Sylvester Stallone, you know what I mean? Or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, look at the facial expressions. Like, that's literally Sly Stallone. We got the Valhallans, which again, like I say, you can get a few of these on the website currently, but the heavy weapons teams and stuff are really hard to find these days. I actually have this lieutenant, which I took his hand flamer and turned it into a las pistol. I plan to use this as my commander for my Imperial Guard army, again, whenever I get around to building said army. I have the models, I just need to get them painted, and it's just way too much. So here's the Mordians, that's what I was talking about. I got a box full of these bastards somewhere. And this lieutenant I was using as my infantry platoon leader, whereas the other one would be the full army leader. And I actually have the, they actually came out with a set back in 2nd edition here, which was just the one box set you could buy of Praetorian Guard, which were exactly the same sculpts as these Mordians, except that they redid their heads all with pith helmets, which is wicked cool. So I actually have this lieutenant in double. I have him with the Mordian helmet, and I have him with the pith helmet. And so maybe I'll incorporate that guy in there somewhere because pith helmets are wicked cool. And the Praetorians were limited right as soon as they came out. So to even find those nowadays, you're going to pay an arm and a leg for those models. But I would love to find them at some point, again, just for nostalgia reasons. We've got the old Talarn Desert Raiders. I still think are awesome models. I mean, they're so cool looking, and there's absolutely nothing about these models that don't make them completely compatible with the current edition. Even the rocket launcher is light years ahead of the other rocket launchers back then, like the Space Marine ones look freaking silly. And as you can see, the heavy weapons teams are actually two separate models. It wasn't until... Ooh, did they even put them together on one base in 3rd? I'm not even sure they did. I think it was in 4th, where they made them one model with 2 wounds instead of 2 separate dudes. So back in this edition, I think you could actually fire this guy's las gun. Nowadays, you can only fire 1 weapon from 1 model, so it's like they fire the... Even though this guy has a las gun, it's like they only fire the heavy weapon for some silly freaking reason. Regardless, moving on. The old Cadians, which are still wicked cool models. I do, unlike the Catechins, I do think the plastic Cadians are better than the old school Cadians. But even look at this plasma gun. Like, a lot of the plasma guns in Second Ed were very bulky and rounded. They didn't look as sleek as this. So this was almost the aesthetic that they were going to bring over into the next edition. But you can see the old flamer here, the big head on it. They brought back a bit of that aesthetic with Horus Heresy. They gave him that head again. But probably just, I think a lot of the aesthetics in Horus Heresy was because people started using Rogue Trader models and Second Ed models to represent their Horus Heresy to kind of give them that older feel. And then Forge just went, well, we might as well go with it, right? So the current flamers have that more standard modern day flamethrower head you think of. This flamethrower head was always a cone, and all the armies had it back then. It did look kind of silly, but it was cool nonetheless. And the old Ratlings I think are cool too. I mean, the new Ratlings are awesome. They're wicked cool sculpts, but these ones just look a little bit goofier. And I like that they have like the Hobbit feet and stuff. The new ones are much more serious looking, but I would totally grab a unit of these old school Ratlings and throw them into my Imperial Guard army because those models are just spectacular. There we go, we got the Attilan Rough Riders. These would be your auxiliary troops because we got the Ogrins and the Attilan Rough Riders. Again, these were the only Rough Rider models you could have back then. They didn't have any other regiments on horseback. After 3rd edition dropped, a lot of people started to make their own conversions. They started to use cold ones, put Catechins on them, right? Because actually in the fluff, Catechin has cold ones on their world, which is interesting to note. And then, like I say, they came out with Talarn Rough Riders at one point to match the Talarn stuff. Because I think Forge World did a whole line of Talarn stuff in resin. Again, like I say, you can purchase probably the standard infantry units in pewter still on the GW website, but none of the specialty stuff. And I'm not even entirely sure if Forge World does the Talarn anymore. I should have probably looked that up before this video, but I didn't. And so, again, maybe one of those things you guys can comment below and let me know. Does Forge World still make resin Talarn? Here's a cool picture of an Imperial Guard army as the fluff dictated back then. The Imperial Guard loved to mix regiments from different worlds, and so right here we have Catechins on this side, Cadians on this side, being led by Yark, which is interesting because, like I say, the Armageddon Wars were a thing. They were in the fluff, but they hadn't come out with the Steel Legion models yet, and so this was literally what you represented because Armageddon was thrown a whole bunch of different regiments to try and defend against its orc invasion. We also have the Mordians, of course, in the center here, with their badass artillery tanks, which makes perfect sense, and the heavy weapons up here. We've got the Attilan Rough Riders flanking over here, going around the flanks, which is exactly what they would be used for. And Ogrins, of course, because you can't have a guard army without Ogrins. And as you notice when we went through the Orc book, even Orc could take Ogrins, which is wicked cool. There's probably Chaos equivalents too. We'll check that out once we hit the Chaos book. And now we get to look at all the cool tanks. The Leman Russ, awesome. The Leman Russ Demolisher with the old pewter cannon on it and plasma cannons on the silly looking plasma cannons. These were pewter pieces actually. the cannon there and the demolisher cannon that added on to this basic plastic kit. And the aesthetics of the Leman Russ has not changed much, actually. But when you compare the new kit to the old kit, there actually is minor differences in sort of the details. Like, all the details are still there in the current kit, and they're very similar, but there's just this little difference. And I can't even talk about it, really, because it's like, I can't pinpoint the subtle differences without holding the two models next to each other, but the Leman Russ's eye field in my Iron Warriors army are the old models. But when you hold them next to a new one, you can actually see subtle differences, so that's just interesting to note. And of course, now they come with a lot more variants. Back in this edition, there was just the battle tank and the Demolisher siege tank. There wasn't the Executioner and the Punisher and all the other various like, what is there, 6 variants now, or 6 or 8 variants now? Chimera, again, like I say, the new Chimera still sticks to this aesthetic, but I have a couple of the newer Chimeras in my Nurgle Renegades army, and then I have some of the older Chimeras, which is this one here, in my converted squad army. And this turret is actually super thin when you hold it up, like top to bottom. When you hold it up next to the newer ones, the turret got a lot thicker. And also this front plate changed, and like, obviously again, the general look of the tank, you wouldn't, just looking at it, you wouldn't be able to tell it was an older Chimera. But you look at the current one next to the old one, you're like, wow, like, this is just a little bit more sleek, this one's just a little more fine-tuned, there's just slight little details that are different. And this is the old school Griffin. I believe it was only available with Cadians on the back of it. Again, I'm not sure the Griffin is still even a thing in the Imperial Guard book. I'd have to look that up. It might be even like a Forge World thing or something. Again, comment below, let me know. I would love to know if Griffins are still around. Obviously, there's more effective artillery tanks on the Chimera chassis these days. You know, the guys with the big-ass rockets and stuff. Looking at different paint schemes. So just letting you know that you don't have to stick to the standard paint schemes. I always really liked this blue and white uniform for the Mordians. When I started painting my Mordians, I started doing them black. It's kind of similar to this with the red, and then I actually gave them tan pants as opposed to black pants. I've always really liked that paint scheme, and I've always kind of wanted to do it, but it's just too pretty. That's not how I do things. No catechins. It's pretty cool. They got the tiger stripes. That's a neat camo pattern. And this plasma gun model I actually currently have in my Renegades and Heretics army, in my command squad. Again, the sleekness of the Imperial Guard plasma gun compared to all the other stuff in 2nd edition, where the Orc plasma gun was almost more cone-shaped. It got fatter as it got towards the tip of the barrel. And then the Space Marine one was just so big and round, unlike the newer Space Marine one, which is more sleek, very similar to this. But as you can see, all the Guard regiments, I guess they just did it that way because obviously an Imperial Guardsman would have a much smaller plasma gun. He wouldn't be able to handle the size of a Space Marine plasma gun. Even if it's the same weapon rules-wise, it would be a little cumbersome to carry. Space Marine weapons. Space Marines are much bigger. And the Melta-guns, you know, the aesthetic has not changed. Here we go, we're looking at regiment organizations. Now, I'm not sure if you needed to do it this way for rules, but they definitely were arranged this way fluff-wise. So we're looking at a regiment, has various companies, and then there's platoons attached to those companies. So one company has within it multiple platoons, and this is just showing you a standard platoon. So in third at least, as one troop choice, you took a platoon command and 2 to 5 infantry, and then you could attach heavy weapon units and special weapon units and stuff like that. In this particular case, they have done exactly that, but we will look at the army list in a few minutes and actually be able to tell how they were legitimately organized in the rules, at least. But this is how they sort of explain it to you as far as the fluff. And artillery companies, there you go. So you've got an HQ tank and 3 squadrons of Lehmans. An artillery company, so it's tank company of all Lehman Russes. I'd be interested to know if you could even do that in 2nd edition. I know in 3rd they actually had a tank company army list, which was like a White Dwarf only thing, which lasted all the way through until 5th. I'm not sure if they gave them an equivalent in 5th. That obviously 4th was an add-on to 3rd, so they still allowed that army list. An entire army of Lehman Russes, which in 4th edition was just disgusting. And your artillery company, so you've got literally a basilisk leading griffins and basilisks. Making perfect sense. Again, 1 HQ tank with 3 squadrons of 3. Seems your standard organization. And this is actually legit nowadays in 8th edition, believe it or not, because you can take a spearhead detachment, in which case you could take an HQ and 3 squadrons of tanks. Even if they're all heavy support, doesn't matter, because there is, I don't think there's an, yeah, you can put a tank commander in any tank, can't you? It doesn't have to be a Lehman Russ. Again, I don't have the current Astra Militarum book, but I'm pretty sure you can take a tank commander in any tank, so let me know, guys, because it would actually be wicked cool to have a tank company where you have a Lehman Russ leading squadrons of Lehman Russes, and then an artillery company where you have like a Basilisk leading squadrons of Basilisks. Basilisks. Alright, so here we go. We got some data sheets, or data faxes as they called them back in 2nd. We've got here your Sentinel. So as you can see, is armor 15. So like I say, in 3rd, they really changed the armor rules and armor penetration rules. So this is a light armored vehicle at armor 15. Like I said to you, the lowest in the game was 10, with the exception of maybe the Gene Stealer Armored Limo, which was 9. So you saw even in the Eldar book that the Wraith Guard, though they are infantry models, were armor 10, because they're robots, right? As opposed to having a toughness characteristic. And this system, of course, starts to make sense to you when you start looking at the armor penetration rolls. So in this case, an assault cannon has a d6 plus d10 plus 8 armor penetration, which is just gross. So right there, the minimum you're going to get is 10, and the maximum you're going to get is 24, which would just blow the crap out of a Sentinel. The Sentinels had assault cannons back then, which is interesting to note, because I don't think they can have them nowadays. But if you look at the old Sentinel model, you'll see why. I think the assault cannon was the only weapon it could carry. Imperial Guard Hellhound, so your standard sort of Chimera chassis. Interesting that the turret is the most armored part of it, at armor 22, whereas his tracks are armor 16. Interesting. And the hull is 21 at the front and 18 on the sides and rear. That's interesting. And of course, each vehicle has a different movement characteristic. So in the case of the Sentinel, very similar to Dreadnoughts, they've of course given him a movement in his profile of 8 inches, and he's got the weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, initiative, all that kind of stuff, much like a Dreadnought would. Whereas these tanks just simply have their movement, combat speed, fast speed, ram value, etc., and then armor values for their locations. Walkers fall sort of into that weird in-between category, and did all the way up until 7th. Now everything has a toughness, everything has wounds, blah blah blah. They've done away with initiative, of course, and even your standard tanks have attacks nowadays, which is unorthodox when it comes to all the past editions. But I like it. I like the 8th edition and how they're doing things. We've got your Lehman Russ Demolisher. There you go. So as you see here, your Lehman Russ was actually 22 on the front and 20 on the sides, which is really heavy armor, and his turret was 25 on the front. Wow. Tracks being 17, so even the tracks are a little more heavily armored than the Chimera. Yeah, it's super slow, so it's like its slow movement speed is 4 inches and its combat speed is 8 inches, whereas the Chimera, where am I looking at? It was a Hellhound, but it's close enough. Okay, 5 inches and 10 inches, so it's just 1 inch slower or 2 inches slower if you're going fast. Same. So the Leman Russ Battle Tank has the 5 and 10, whereas the Demolisher was 4 and 8. That's interesting to note. So the extra artillery cannon actually slows down the vehicle considerably. Looks like the same armor values though. Yep. Well, nope. A battle tank is actually slightly less armored. Yeah, because the sponsons on the Demolisher are 18. The sponsons here are 17. Other than that, it's the same. But on the Demolisher, the tracks are 17, and on the battle tank, the tracks are 16. So that's interesting. The Demolisher was a much heavier version of the Leman Russ. I mean, I'm not going over all the details on these data sheets because, like, you know, A, time, and B, these two are pretty much the same. It's just the minor differences, obviously, with the speed, what their weapon loadouts are, and their armor values. Ooh, an old school map of the galaxy. I actually love the old school maps of the galaxy because, again, the goofy factor is kind of there, which is why I love 2nd edition. In 3rd, they did a much more detailed map of the galaxy, and then now they've completely changed the map. I mean, they literally put that rift right down the middle of the galaxy where chaos just broke out, and like I say, they are expanding the fluff currently. Interesting how they added here the squat worlds, squat homeworlds, right in the center of the galaxy. One race that has been retconned out of the fluff that I wish they never got rid of, but I won't get off on that tangent today. So Armageddon is there, as you can see, very close to the Cadian Gate. Cadia, of course. Macaria, Talarn, Attila, all the worlds are represented there. They're even showing you some Space Marine. So Macragge is all the way out here. Ball there, the homeworld of the Blood Angels. We've got Necromunda actually on the list too, which is pretty cool. So you have an idea of what's going on and where everything is in relationship to each other. Fenris, Space Wolf homeworld. Cool. And more data faxes. So we got your Basilisk, a light armored vehicle, obviously. The highest armor rating on there being 18, which is interesting to note. And again, a 5, 10, and 15 movement. Okay, so that seems to be your standard tank movement. Because we've also got the Griffin here, which has a 6, 12, and 20 movement. Huh. So it's a fast little bugger. I guess with the Basilisk, it's carrying, again, a giant artillery cannon, where this just has a heavy mortar, which is much less cumbersome than an Earthshaker cannon. So it's interesting that they've added those differences, those minor differences in movement, because those who have played from 3rd to 7th understand that everything had a standard movement. It was either like 6 or 12, basically. Some things would get bonuses on top of that, but most stuff was either 6 or 12. Because they've done away with the movement characteristic in the profile. In 3rd, that is. And the Chimera, I am interested now after seeing the movements. Yeah, so the Chimera is the same speed as the Griffin, 6, 12, and 20. 6, 12, and 20. Yeah, the other one was 5, 10, and 15. Okay, yeah, okay, so cool. Light armored. Actually, not that light armored because its front armor is 21. Something to note. Cool. And there he is. The old school Yark. I still really like that model. You can see he's actually got an orc skeleton on his bolter, which is super cool. And the claw that he took from the war boss, as is commemorated on his banner here. And here we've got the Eldar versus the Imperial Guard, which is super cool. You got the Valhallans, again being led by Yark, which is interesting. And the old school Eldar, the jet bikes, which aren't all that different from nowadays. We've got Ulthwi, Samhan, and then of course the aspects, which could apply to any craft world, really. But there it is. And you can see, it's just a side note here, that the Ulthwi, their colors were basically yellow and black back then, which I believe I didn't actually mention in the Eldar book, what we saw when we looked at the last time at the Eldar book. Nowadays they're black and bone, so it's just an interesting little change, worth noting. Here we go, we've got a couple of War Gear cards, which are cool. I probably went over these in the War Gear card video that I did, so go back and check that out if you want. This here looks to be, yep, War Gear cards that specifically relate to characters that are in this book. They probably didn't include these in the core set, only because these characters, of course, weren't included in the core set. But there it is, nonetheless. Alright, now we're getting into special rules. So we got weapon teams. So obviously they operate very differently than most other basic infantry models in the Imperial Guard Army. Weapon teams, sidearms, las cannon teams, interesting. Stay within 2 inches of each other, of course that's common because everything had to stay within 2 inches of each other. Loader is armed with the same weapon as the rest of the squad, generally a las gun, and can shoot and fight just like any other guardsman. Yeah, see? So nowadays they have them both on the same. They're both counted as one model with 2 wounds, which I always thought was really weird. And they've carried that through even to 8th, which I just find really freaking strange. Because it literally is 2 different dudes. And like, if one model can only fire 1 weapon, like why would you have one model with 2 wounds? Like, why even bother giving the second guy a las gun? So weird. Back then, yep, you had 2 separate guys, so literally it was like one guy's firing the autocannon and the other guy's firing a las gun. I wonder why they have las cannons separated from the others. Oh, just because the old school las cannons, the dude wasn't actually sitting on it. They're just explaining to you that one guy has to fire it. It's probably unnecessary, but splitting weapons teams. A squad of Imperial Guardsmen is permitted to split off from its weapon team as it moves. It can do this even if the team has been reduced to a single model due to casualties. For example, the rest of the squad might move off, leaving the weapon team where it is. Ooh, that's strange. That's kind of unheard of in future editions. Once divided, the squad and the weapon team become 2 separate units and remain as so for the rest of the game, assuming that it has its full strength of 10. This will give you a unit of 8 and a weapons team of 2. Fair enough. That's pretty cool. I didn't know you could split them off. Because there were negatives to firing heavy weapons. Actually, I'm not even sure you could fire heavy weapons at all on the move back in 2nd Ed. Again, one of those things, maybe you guys can comment and let me know, because I don't have time to look up the rules right now. So it's kind of neat that you could still get your weapons teams to be able to fire while the rest of the unit moved forward. That's pretty cool. Command squads. Command rule. Guardsmen within 12 inches may use their leadership. Command headquarters squad or command HQ squad. Like command squads may also include other special individuals like Primaris Psychers and blah 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 blah. Cool. Rough Rider command squads. It's interesting. 5 men including a lieutenant. Functions the same way as a command squad and any Imperial Guard units within 12 inches. Yep. So you could actually have Rough Rider command. That's kind of cool. Because I only remember the standard Rough Rider models. I don't think they actually ever made command models, but I suppose back in these days they really pushed for you to convert your own stuff. Nowadays they're like, oh, if it's not in the kit then you can't do it, you know what I mean? But back then they really were like, convert, scratch build. Again, maybe that's why I'm such a huge fan of converting and scratch building everything, because maybe it brings me back to these days, I don't know. And your veterans, they could have special abilities. Now there's really just like 3 to choose from, as far as I know, that you can make your veterans have these, like one of the 3 special abilities. But as you can see here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to choose from. That's crazy. And they actually cost extra points, which is something worth noting. Reserves, preliminary barrages, cool. Comlinks, how comlinks work for calling down a barrage. Now they just give you like bonuses to your leadership or something. Maybe they let you re-roll your leadership tests and stuff. In the past editions, they made Voxes to re-roll orders, which was really like your leadership test for your orders. You could re-roll, which was really strange because it's like the guy shouts an order, "Hey guys, do this," and it's like, "We didn't hear you. Use the phone." Whereas you'd think they would just use the comm link to start with, right? Silly. Anyway, we've got your army lists. So here we go. When choosing Imperial Army, you spend your points on 3 categories of troops: command, battle line, and support. Okay, so it's the same thing, they've just called them other things. You're permitted to spend only a portion of your points for every category. For example, you can spend up to maximum 50% on your command. Yeah, so that would be 50% characters. Each category is an armor selection box. So here we go, 50% command, 25% or more battle line, so that would be your squads, I guess. And then spent up to 25% support. May include up to 3 squads of a specific Imperial Guard regiment. Okay. So in order to take Valhalla and Ice Warriors in your your 25% battle line troops, you had to take a Valhalla command squad, which is interesting to note. You could have up to 3 squads. So that was the same thing I showed you in the color pages there, and it's showing it again here. So in order to take infantry squads, you can take up, for each command, you could take up to 3 infantry squads, I believe is how I'm interpreting this. So, but they had to be of the same regiment, logically, which makes perfect sense, right? Here, sorry, I got a little bit off camera. And then you could take the auxiliary squads on top of that. For each infantry squad you had, you could take another unit, which I would imagine you would include from your support. And then weapons and war gear. Cool. Okay, so they do have slightly different restrictions than any other army, only because you had to have a command for every 3 squads of infantry. But again, there you go, 50% command, 25% plus battle line, and 25% support. Special characters, victory points, splitting up victory points, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we're going in the war gear list. It's your standard war gear that you're used to seeing. I don't think there's much here that didn't carry over into our current editions, because we even have las guns with hotshot packs. I assume that's for your... Yep, well here it's for your commanders, but that's because the stormtroopers carry that stuff, and so why would a commander not have access to it? And the veteran abilities, very similar to the aspect warrior abilities that we saw in the Eldar book, where you could literally give them extra abilities for a specific point value. And again, this is for ratlings, so it's interesting that ratlings could take veteran abilities. We'll have to take a good look at that when we're in the army list, which we are in now, the actual physical army list. So you had 2 levels of commander. You had your captain and your colonel. Now there is just a company commander and a platoon commander, I believe, are the only 2 options. Again, from 3rd to 7th, they had it as the company commander was the HQ choice, and then for a troop, you purchased a platoon commander and the infantry squads and heavy weapon squads accordingly. So yeah, here we go. They do have Rough Rider command squads, so that's awesome, because that means you could probably have a whole army of Rough Riders. I don't see why not, provided that the Rough Riders were in your normal squads allotment. We'll see that when we go on to the next page. So yeah, they're led by a lieutenant. Cool. Primary Psychers. So again, 4 levels of Psychers, as we've seen with pretty much every other race. Characteristics increasing accordingly. So here we go. Now we're into the battle line. So this is what we've got here. You had to take a command squad, and then 3 regiment units of the same regiment, obviously. So if you took a Catachan command squad, you had to take 3 Catachan squad. I think it's actually said up to 3, but so probably not more than that. So if you wanted to have more than that, you probably had to keep adding extra command squads, because I guess a commander can only command so many dudes. So as your battle line squads, you have Imperial Guard squads, Imperial Guard heavy weapon squads. Interesting. So I suppose you theoretically could do a heavy weapon platoon with that organization. Yep, Rough Rider squads are in the standard battle line, so you could have a Rough Rider command squad leading a platoon of Rough Riders. That is awesome. Ogrins are in your basic battle line squads, which is cool to note. But I didn't see Ogren heroes, so that's, yeah, there's not an Ogren character. Whereas in the Orc book, we actually had Ogryn heroes. So I guess if you wanted to do a whole Ogryn army, you actually had to choose it from the Orc book. My brain just exploded. Regardless, yeah, I guess they don't want Ogryns leading humans because, of course, you can't trust Ogryns, and the Imperium does not trust abhumans very much. I guess they include them as auxiliary troops, but they never give them any actual power, whereas I guess in the Orc book, the Ogryns were actually considered mercenaries. And so I guess there's different rules that apply there. And I'm not sure if Chaos had an equivalent. It would make sense that they did, but we won't know. Again, it's been 20 years since I've looked at the Chaos book, but we will get to that book eventually. In fact, yeah, it might actually be... Yeah, you know what? Looking at my bookshelf, I might actually do it as the next one. So, Stormtroopers, I guess you could have a whole army of Stormtroopers, which is cool. Wicked cool. In fact, I'm going to look at the Ratlings here, because it was strange that Ratlings could have better. A squad may be upgraded to veteran status by choosing one veteran ability for the list cost indicated. Okay. So that's cool, because that means you could literally have a platoon of Ratlings, and then you could be like, this unit of Ratlings are Ratling veterans, and it's like, hey, okay. And I don't see a divider here for support, so we're looking at Leman Russes, Hellhounds, Basilisks, Chimeras, Sentinels. They're all your standard battle line selection. Huh. Neat. Yeah, see? So for support, they've actually just listed allies. Space Marine, Imperial Agents, Eldar, and Squats being their allies. Interesting. So, looking back at the characters, I don't recall seeing... Yeah, it doesn't say anything about them being in tanks. I mean, I'm sure, of course, you could always put them in a Chimera, but when we were looking at the color pages there, you had like a Leman Russ leading an army of Leman Russes. Yeah, it doesn't say anything here about putting a commander in a Leman Russ at all. Yeah, no. So I guess you theoretically couldn't do that by rules. You could always have a command squad in a Chimera leading, you know, 3 units of Basilisks, which is cool. It's amazing how there were a lot of restrictions on the rules back here, but it's like you're almost more free to do what you want, at least more so than you were from 3rd to 7th. Interesting, we've got Commander Solar Macarius as one of the special characters. For those of you who don't know, Macarius is one of the great heroes of the Imperium, who they named the Macarius tank after. I have never seen rules for him in 40k, though, at least not anytime recently, so it's interesting that they put him as one of the special characters back in 2nd. I'm actually pretty interested in looking at his rules. Okay, just got a bolt pistol and chainsword, wears carapace armor, D6 strategy rating, can take up to 3 war gear cards. Sudden unprepared assaults often horrified his generals. That's interesting. So that's what makes him special, because his D6 strategy rating. Whereas I think, well, my brain might be wrong here again. My brain is blanking today, but I think the highest strategy rating was like 3 back then. It was like most armies had a 1 to 3. Like I say, Orcs were like 1 or 2, and the Space Marines were 3, and blah, 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 blah. This guy has a D6, so it could be anywhere from 1 to 6, which is just insane. If Macarius strategy rating is 1 to 3, then reserves and barrages are worked out as described in the rules. If it's 4 to 6, the commander has plunged his army into combat without waiting for battle barrage. No barrages are permitted. If a strategy rating is 6, then in addition to losing the barrage, all reserves must be deployed on the table immediately before they... That's actually a disadvantage to have a higher than 3 strategy rating. It's just like, he's just like, no, fuck it, we're attacking now. No holding back. Let's do this, guys. So we got Commissar Yark. Again, one of the greatest heroes of the Imperium, who has carried through to today. We still got Yark in the rules, which is awesome. He's got a force field. He's got his cool battle claw, which is of course an orc power claw, or orc power fist they called it back then. Orc battle claw is modified for the Commissary Yarrick by the Imperial Artificers and utilizes a power field to create the weapons comparable to a power fist. Yeah, okay, so basically it's just a power fist. And he's got his cool laser eye, which is actually a shooting weapon, which is kind of neat. He shoots a little strength 4 laser out of his eye. That's kind of cool. He is an inspiring leader. He has the Iron Will. So 1 to 4, he restores Yarrick's wounds characteristics. Wow. Oh, to 1. Okay. And he carries on fighting. 5 to 6, casualty cannot fight on. Interesting. So it's like literally like when he dies, you can bring him back with 1 wound. That's kind of cool. There are various special characters that do that nowadays too. Nork Dead Dog. Awesome. So glad he's here. You guys know who he is. He has a current iteration in the rules. They didn't have a model for him back then though, and they currently do in the new plastic kits. Captain Al-Rahem of the Talarn. I believe we actually had special characters for most of the regiments back then. So this guy being the Talarn captain. Yep, we got Captain Chenkov, Valhalla, Colonel Schaefer, and his last Chancer's Penal Legion. That's cool. That's cool. Because they didn't actually come out with models for the Penal Legion until 3rd. And nowadays I'm actually finding that as I'm looking around the old Hammer communities and stuff like that, people are aching to find these models. Because they came out with a wicked cool pewter box set in 3rd, and then they just kind of vanished. I mean, now we can have penal squads and stuff like that in the rules. And we could after that, but they like kind of got rid of that like special character aspect of that unit in 4th. So they were around in 2nd, which is cool to note. And of course they carried into 3rd, where they actually made models for them in 3rd, and then I guess they just got rid of them because they, I don't know, whatever. And then we got a rattling special character, which is kind of cool. Stumper Muck Start. Special character, he does not have to be placed in as part of a command squad. He fights on his own. Cool. Trick shot, killer shot, infiltrate. Neat. Captain Mulgul Khmer of the Attilans. That's neat. Included as an Imperial Guard army and the captain of a Rough Rider Command HQ. Yeah, okay. Replacing the Rough Rider Lieutenant with Captain Mulgul Khmer. Neat. I would actually love to see an Attilan army. They've kind of just totally been forgotten about nowadays. I guess they sort of have the White Scars, so they have that sort of, like I say, Mongolian sort of element in the fluff currently anyway. But I have not seen Attillans in a very long time, or anyone even trying to represent them. So it'd be kind of cool, just as a cool fluff army, to build a little Attilan army. Armored Brutality, what do we got here? Okay, this is just a little white dwarf sort of thing. Cool. So it's just a little cool little thing at the end here telling you how to sort of field a Imperial Guard tank company. Yep, just giving you tactical safety in numbers, tidal wall, griffin bombardments, and the conclusion. So that's just a cool little white dwarf fluff piece. Not fluff, but like, you know, tactical piece. And here you go, they actually give you an example of an army list, which is cool. So we've got, we've got Acadian Command Squad with an attached Primaris Psyker, heavy weapon team in a Chimera. And then we've got Imperial Guard squads, 1 sergeant, 6 guardsmen, a flamer, and a weapon team. Yep, so it was 1 to 3 squads. So this is showing you the organization right here. So for the command, you took 1 Acadian command, right? And then we've got an infantry squad, a heavy weapon squad, and a rattling squad. And a Leman Russ as the Acadian one. Then we've got a Catachan command squad, incorporating an Imperial Guard squad and a Rough Rider squad. Right, under the Catachan command. And that's your 1,500 point army. So few models though, eh? Like literally, like this army would be like, what is it, 20 infantry models, a heavy weapon, some ratlings, rough riders, and 2 command squads with 1 Leman Russ. I've mentioned that before in our other Relics videos, where it's like the amount of models you needed back then was so tiny in comparison to today. Like literally a 2,000 point army back here in this edition was like a 1,000 point army nowadays. It's like they've slowly just been decreasing the points to make you buy more and more models. So you have a 2,000 point game, and literally it's like 3 times the size now as it was back in 2nd Ed. That's fine. And finally, the catalog pages, which are always fun to look at. So like I told you, all the pewter bits. So you actually had the plasma cannon and the multi-melta options made out of pewter, and then the badass demolisher cannon, the pewter demolisher cannon. Which actually, the Griffin, again, I would love to know if the Griffin is even still around, but here's the old pewter set, which allowed you to modify the plastic Chimera body. Cool pewter platform, all this stuff. And again, like I say, it only came with Cadians on the back of it, which is kind of sad, but they didn't have the variety, the availability of the variety of molds that they have nowadays. Of course, things have amped up, technology has improved, and you know, our new kits are just light years ahead of these old kits. But this is how they used to do everything. I mean, they would build a core kit, and if they made variants of it, they would just create like a pewter add-on blister sort of idea. The old Leman Russ tank, again, very similar to the current Leman Russes. Like I say, you're looking at this right now and you're like, what's the difference? Other than like the shovel looks a little different, right? But if you actually hold the 2 models next to each other, you will notice subtle differences. And same with the Chimera. The one that stands out to me is the size of the turret, because these old turrets were actually, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 millimeters shorter than the current turret. And the new one, of course, has an armor plate behind the turret weapon, whether you put a heavy bolter, a heavy flamer, or a laser on there. It doesn't just sink into the turret like that. It's actually got like an armor plate, which is interesting to note. Just how the models have evolved over time. And here we go. We got all the codices. This is the one I was going to show you next, the Warhammer 40k battles. But I think I might just go right into the Chaos Space Marines, because I am amped to get into that book as soon as possible. And we've got the old 40k starter set, the Dark Millennium set, both of which I have shown you in our past videos, so go back through the playlist and check that out. The old Catachan Jungle Fighters, which probably had the Catachans and the Cadians had probably the most variety back then, as they do now. All the other regiments are kind of like phased out at this point in our current, 2018. And like I say, they redid these models in 3rd. They created the plastic Catachans and the plastic Cadians, both of which we still have today as our current model line. The Mordian Iron Guard. Love these models. Like I said, I got a crap load of them in a box somewhere that I will paint up someday. Right now I got other things on my plate. But still cool models to this day. Absolutely love them. Valhalla Ice Warriors. Cool. So I was wrong. They actually have the same variety that the Catachans had. Looks like all the regiments, they did justice. Gave them at least a couple weapon options. Like, you'll actually notice that the old pewter regiments, they don't have all of the heavy weapons available to them. Like, let's just flip back for a second. So the Catachans, we have a missile launcher, a las cannon, and a heavy bolter. So no autocannon option and no mortar option. Interesting. Moving into the Mordians, we have a las cannon, a mortar, and a heavy bolter. So no autocannon and no missile launcher. Moving into the Ice Warriors, we have a mortar, a las cannon, and a heavy bolter. So again, no missile launcher, no autocannon. The old Cadians, there they are. They still think look just as good as the new Cadians. Have a heavy bolter, a missile launcher, and an autocannon. So you have no las cannon option and no mortar option. Weird, right? I guess just to represent the characteristics of the Imperial Guard regiments and how they all have different armaments. And we've got the Talaran Desert Raiders, which appear to just have a missile launcher and an autocannon. And I find it really strange that they did it that way, especially because, at least with the Beret Stormtroopers I was talking about, I have a heavy bolter and an autocannon with the Beret Stormtrooper bodies on them. And the model is exactly the same for the heavy bolter and the autocannon, with the exception of that bit, just literally the heavy weapon itself. This piece is the same, this piece is the same, the wheels are the same, the driver's the same. So I guess back in this time you could convert an autocannon onto the other regiments that had just the heavy bolter option with no autocannon option. You could take like this autocannon and put it on that, and take that heavy bolter and put it on this, since these guys don't have a heavy bolter ability. But that would mean you would have to buy both regiments' blisters. But worth noting, I guess you didn't have to, because in this edition they had the separate codes for bits, and I believe Games Workshop sold bits through their catalog up until 2007 or 2008. I guess they stopped doing bits, which was just sad for me, you know, being a conversion freak. I just love the idea of being able to buy a bit, even if it was more expensive than, you know, piecing out the set. The old Ogryn models, I think, are absolutely awesome. And I have one or two of them kicking around. One of them I've now put into my other Renegades and my non-Nurgle Renegades and Heretics army, which is an ally from my Iron Warriors army. It's actually this guy right here, this body, where I just gave him a big spear as my Beastmaster kind of thing. And I still think, because they came out with these, they were going for a while, and they came out with a next set of pewter ones, which I didn't think even looked as good as these. You know what I mean? Like, they looked very boxy and silly. And then in 6th or 7th, they came out with the plastic ones, which are the current Ogryns we have. So the in-between ones I didn't really like, but these ones I absolutely love. And then there was even pewter ones before these, from Rogue Trader, which were just even more goofy and disproportionate, as all the sculpts were in Rogue Trader pretty much. But these models are wicked cool. I would love to get my hands on a bunch of these old pewter ones because they are just spectacular. And there was only 3 variants, but when you purchased this one, for example, it didn't necessarily come with that head, because I believe this one, like I say, was the one I had. These 3 pieces were legit, but it was that head that was actually on it. So I guess just allowing you to switch up the heads, and of course each one of these guys have one arm with a gun and one arm with a combat weapon, whereas this guy was actually the 2, so I guess you couldn't really change up that guy very much. But these 2, you could switch up these 2 parts, you could switch up these parts, of course, and you could switch up the heads. So, you know, in fact there's only 2 sets of legs for 3 models, which is interesting. And there you go, it's telling you the full kit is a head, a torso, a gun, and legs, obviously. Anyway, that is what it is. The old school Ratlings, again, hilariously cool models, and the old school Yark, which is not nearly as dynamic as the current Yark. The current Yark came out in 3rd, in pewter, and then of course now they've just recasted them in fine cast, which is not so fine. But this guy is a super cool model, and if this came into my possession, I would totally use it, because he just looks awesome. And last but not least, let's just take a good look at this cool colored picture where we've got the Imperial Guard facing the Orcs. I am just going to zoom in a bit for you there, so we can take a good look at this battle scene. The old Orc Pewter Dreadnought, which we've commented on before. Got some Blood Axe, some Bad Moons, Evil Suns, the awesome old school artillery pieces. And looking at the terrain here, guys, take a good look at the terrain. Everything here is scratch built. There's no kits involved in this. Like, you can totally tell that these leaves are literally like a dude cut that out of paper and then cut slits in it to make those. This is clump foliage, of course. There's these cool styrofoam toothpick cacti, which I've commented on in the past Orc video. I believe I'm gonna make some of these for our gaming table, because they just look wicked cool, and that would be super easy to do. So stay tuned, in the near future, I will probably do a terrain tutorial on these cool things, just because I have been inspired by these old school books to build some old school looking stuff. And yeah, as you can see here, like this is the old, I talked about that in the orc video, the old orc aesthetic. Nowadays everything's even more shantytowny looking, but like back in this edition, in Fantasy and in 40k, they sort of had these like mud stucco buildings like they would have, you know, in real life in like the Middle East and like Greece and stuff like that. So that's something. The old gas skull. Still love that model. Cool. And that is a disgusting lineup of tanks for 2nd edition. I remember playing back in 2nd edition where like a buddy of mine played Imperial Guard and he had 1 Leman Russ, and it was just a gigantic pain in the ass to deal with. Looking at this right now, like we've got 3 Leman Russes, well 2 battle tanks and 1 Demolisher, and then just the 1 Chimera. I assume transporting this unit of guardsmen. And the Ratling's infiltrating right up front, I guess to take out this artillery piece. Super cool. So there it is, Codex Imperial Guard. So I hope you all enjoyed that look at the 2nd edition Codex Imperial Guard. I had a lot of fun looking through that book, and I'm just having a great time actually looking through all of these 2nd ed books and all the 2nd ed stuff and showing it to you guys, because it's bringing me back to where I started this game in 2nd edition, and it's really bringing me back to my roots, you know what I mean, and bringing up all the fuzzy, nice nostalgia of that time period. Even still in the vein of the awesome nostalgia of that time period, I'm going to show you guys next time the Codex Chaos for 2nd edition. This was my favorite book back in 2nd edition. Just look how freaking thick it is. It was actually 3 different army lists. It was the Chaos Space Marines, the Demons, and the Hordes, which was like Chaos Warriors and Beastmen and stuff in 40k, which is just stupid cool, and I wish stuff like that still existed. I mean, it kind of does, I guess, in the Renegades and Heretics and stuff like that, but not the way it did back then. Regardless, if you guys love this series, please hit the like button below. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and in fact, right now, if you're watching this, what is it right now? It's June 2018. We are doing a giveaway to anyone who hits subscribe. You get an entry to win a Forgebane set with those cool Armiger Knights and a whole Necron army and an Adeptus Mechanicus army and stuff like that. So if you want to win that, hit subscribe. Also, if you want 5 more entries into that contest, go to the link below, check out our Patreon campaign. For as little as $1, you get a whole bunch of extra content, as well as a whole bunch more bonuses. And like these videos early, our normal video feed early. We'll give you 10% off the warpainter.com, for example, a great Canadian supplier of paints, brushes, brush soap, that kind of stuff. And we're happy to be working with them. That's just a couple of things that it offers you. It offers you a whole bunch more, and if you become a patron, you'll get 5 entries into our Forgebane giveaway, so check that out, please, guys. Otherwise, just hit the subscribe button, share this video on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and we'll see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket.